Our journey began in May of 2023 when Paulo Rosado, our CEO, gave the digital team a mission to arm 50% of our organization with generative AI use cases within 6 months. How we started? A complete flatline. We had no additional people, no additional budget, no outside expertise, no experience with LLMs, no blueprint. But what we did have was our people. And we had people who were curious, with entrepreneurial mindset, people who were fearless, people who were resilient. Most of all, we had our OutSystems developers. And our people were the ones that chose the first 4 use cases last summer, along with our business champions. Now, speaking of flatlining, our first business use case was in customer support, and our automation percentage was just flat for 7 months, no matter what we did. The green line represents the self-service percentage, and that's our target. That wasn't even hitting 10%, which was our target. The blue line represents answers to questions. We were hovering around 10 to 14%, and we were handling that through a search API and an article database. And the pink represents incidents. Those are usually more complicated things that require back and forth, usually human intervention. That was single digits. So we ventured to try generative AI. And what we did was start small and start with low-hanging fruit. We started with the blue line answers to questions. So people would come on our support portal and get an automated answer through generative AI. Now I'm going to fill in the middle in a moment, but let me fast forward to when we went live. We went live end of September, early October. 3 months later, that 10 to 14% automation turned into 22%. We thought this was great. January, 25%. Great. May comes of this year, 42% automation. Our team was thrilled. And on the one hand, we were so happy. And then we thought, well, there's probably a mistake here. So we audited ourselves, went through everything in the data lake, checked all the tickets. And guess what? It was correct. But we weren't finished yet. In September of this year, our flat line turned into 62% automation, and we have no intention of stopping now. And so I thought about this complete flat line to spike, from no generative AI to generative AI, from non-believers to believers. And I was reminded of the movie The Matrix, which I know you guys all know that we're all fans of The Matrix with Neo and Morpheus and all of our code names. But that movie has a key theme of duality. And there's a very common, very famous scene where it talks about choice. The choice of reality, the red pill, or blissful denial, the blue pill. And I thought, how appropriate with generative AI and what we're dealing with right now. At the end of the movie, there's a quote that I'm actually just going to borrow because it's so true. I didn't come here to tell you the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. But I did come here to tell you how it began. And speaking of beginnings, our group talks a lot, and this goes back to even to last summer. We talk a lot about how generative AI is a very hands-on experiential learning exercise. You cannot sit back and watch generative AI. You need to have the trust and you need to feel the LLM responses. So we took that into account in the design of our applications and our solution. We also spoke about, each of you are the ones leading your organization through change, which is hard. In fact, you're the one, you're the one, you're the one, you all, we all are the ones to lead our organization through change, through friction, through resistance, through denial, but most of all, through innovation. And so I'm very happy to speak with you all here today, to share our story. And likewise, I would love to hear your stories. I think the 3 things that were most critical for us for creating, enabling a collective brain behind our organization had to do with creating a foundations layer and a foundations team, creating and adding content to a knowledge base, and finally, working with business champions and arming the business champions with something that they can react to, which helps with their strategy and their use cases. Now, what's interesting is you need all three of these to be successful, but only one of the three is actually technical. And if you hear the statistics today, they're saying 90% of organizations either aren't going live, or when they go live, they don't maintain their generative AI use cases. Well, ours have been running for 12 months now, and the results keep getting better and better. So let's dive in. Foundations. We've all seen the shift from systems of record over to SaaS sprawl. In my team, in OutSystems, I run the digital transformation group. We service all of the departments as well as some externally facing audiences with our applications. We have 250 OutSystems apps and more than 250 SaaS applications, all integrated in a composable architecture services framework, API first. Now, when GenAI came into the picture, it made total sense how it fit into this ecosystem, part OutSystems, part SaaS. With a foundations team, this diagram is all possible. So let's look at the solution. This is a blueprint of what we produced. Everything in white is an OutSystems application. Everything highlighted in gray was built by our foundations team. So if we start at the top, the knowledge base, you're going to want to create a layered knowledge base of your files of content for the LLMs to create context. Second, a playground. I didn't come up with this term. It's an industry term. But what we use the playground for is it's an OutSystems application for pre-work for the business stakeholders. We give access to the LLMs, the business stakeholder content, and we allow them to play with the LLMs so that they learn with us. They actually get new insights and it changes their strategy. It even accelerates their runtime application by using the playground. Third, we have a metrics dashboard, and we also track behind the scenes with the back office, things like the token limits, token counts, costs, distribution of any kind of metrics or any kind of use cases are managed through there. We also do load balancing. Finally, we have the runtime application. Now, if you're wondering what is a foundations team, this is our folks in the digital transformation group. And the foundations group is actually two people, two OutSystems developers. The lead is in the center there with a second one. And what they do is they connect with the LLMs. They create all of the services that the other teams leverage. They add new content layers. They structure the content and they manage the layers of content. And they also oversee the back office and all of the performance metrics. Now, the four teams that you see around the foundations team, those guys run the runtime application. They work with the business. They manage the use cases and they do all the prompting. Now, they leverage the services created by the foundations team, so no one has to reinvent the wheel. This is why both of the applications are fast. They're built in a matter of days, weeks. Now, before I leave this slide, I just want to highlight in light blue, we have Ricardo Sciarra here, known as Kadu, and he is the team lead for the language translation use case for our community. And I know you heard about that earlier today with Miguel, but I just want to have Kadu stand. You can all see who he is, and you can talk with him after this session more about the language translation use case. So where does Foundations fit in? You have an OutSystems application. You then have the foundational layer behind the OutSystems application that has the APIs to the LLMs and the services. Now, speaking of LLMs, within digital, we actually have 17 LLMs. And I know that seems like a lot, but we test all the versions and we figure out where these companies are going, all these third-party LLMs. Now, when we create the playgrounds, we only hand out 3, 4, or 5 LLMs, but we do give them out and we let the business play with Microsoft or AWS Bedrock so they understand the differences in the versions and they can choose, which way they prefer the answer coming back. It also keeps them up to speed with what's going on in the industry. Now I'm going to show you 3 playgrounds here. And speaking of LLM comparison, this is the first playground. This was built for our demand gen team in marketing. And the exercise was creating a personalized email. Now what you're looking at is a screen with 3 different versions. So we can play with it with 3 different prompts. We can put 3 different models in. We can change the settings or the creativity meter or the temperature check. But the point of this is they can actually do the same thing 2 or 3 times and then pick and choose what works. So in the playground, they're making decisions around the prompting and around the content and around the strategy. So when the runtime application is ready to be built with a different interface, we've got all the decisions made and they've stayed right with us. It also increases the trust factor. Let me show you a second playground. You might recognize this interface. It's from the AI Agent Builder, powered by Mentor. On the left, you have the instructions, the LLMs, you can add your content. In this use case, it's for our GTM group. And the exercise is looking at coaching. How can we provide coaching and training, perhaps for our field teams? And the subject, active listening. The LLM is returning coaching material and an agenda. Third, this is actually for our product marketing team. The interface looks a little different, but what we're doing is doing bulk processing of sales call transcripts. So these are pre-recorded calls. We've stored every single one of them. We've imported from our CRM all calls over the past couple of years. So we can go back and do an entire quarter's worth with a single prompt. So for example, we can say, what kind of use cases were discussed? Were use cases discussed? What could we have handled differently on the call? That same prompt can run across an entire quarter's worth of material and produce a result. So for product marketing, this gives them good insight into what's happening on these calls in bulk. Now, this happens in 90 minutes, an entire quarter's worth of calls with the same prompt. So deep analysis can be happening here. So your playgrounds help increase the strategy, the trust. They help you make smart decisions if you're a business owner. Now, the beauty of it is both the playgrounds and the runtime applications only take hours, days, maximum a couple weeks. And especially if you're cloning applications, even less time. We produced 2 apps in 2 days in July. Now, what will hang you up will be the content. So we've taken 2 to 3 months to check our content. We always have a human in the loop, but that is something that if your content's not ready or if it's producing results that you don't expect, then spend the time on the content. So for us in general, we've gone live in 1 to 3 months with generative AI use cases. Now, the clones are happening faster and faster as we go. If you're curious about the architecture, I'll show you a diagram here. What's in red are the 10 services that our foundations team built. All of these services get leveraged by the 4 surrounding AI teams within our digital transformation group. Now, the group also makes decisions on what APIs to other OutSystems apps do we want to have here. And we also connect to SaaS. We make decisions around our content. What kind of layers of content do we want to have? We choose which LLMs, and we also have our Pinecone database behind the scenes. Serving all of this is our dashboard and our back office. Now, I'll show you just a brief screen here, and these are easy to make. This shows our performance metrics, including what we're doing at the use case level, what we're tracking for the LLM usage, which is tracked in tokens. But we also, like I said, in the back office, track how many playgrounds we've given out, how many use cases there are, what kind of prompts are people having. We can restrict things as well. If somebody's doing too many queries, we can restrict how many calls to the LLMs we make. So everything's managed in this back office. But I want to draw your attention to one comment around SaaS and the fact that in this year especially, you're seeing cost premiums as add-ons for every single SaaS tool. Every single one we have has an AI add-on. If you add up the costs of that, and I think of the sum of what we're spending internally on our SaaS, it's 8 figures. So these things go into the multiple millions. If you pay an add-on for every single SaaS, you're going to be spending thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even more. But if you set up a centralized foundations team and centralized knowledge base, all of your content and all of your foundations are centralized and can serve all populations. So you're not having a siloed AI approach where there's an AI solution for every single SaaS tool. Instead, everything is feeding into the foundations. Our total cost, you might not believe this, but it's 14,000 euros in an entire year, internally, externally, and with all the use cases we produced, 14,000 euros. So for us, it makes total sense, build versus buy. Now that you've heard a bit about the foundations team, what kind of services we create, how we're structured organizationally, and the concept of the playground versus the runtime application and the benefits, let's dive into the content. Now, when I talk about a layered approach, I literally mean layered. And the reason is we are toggling content on and off. It could be for security reasons or privacy, or it could be for particular use cases. Now, this idea of layering is something we thought about last June, and it was very important from the start because we did not want to have a disorganized approach to our content. Now, the foundations team manages how to structure the content. They manage how to add new layers to the content. We deal with the communication centrally around what content is actually in the knowledge base. So for example, if you have professional services and professional services wants to add a new layer, sales and marketing and customer success and customer support might also be interested in that content layer. And so the beauty of it is by adding that content layer, you've actually enhanced all of the use cases at once. Because the more context and the more grounding you can do with these LLMs, the better the response. Now, if there's security concerns or something private, we can actually even inherit the Google security settings. We have 4 different levels of security. So when those content files get added, we inherit the security. And of course, any kind of centralization requires a discussion, and we work with our whole legal team on what we're storing and what we're not storing. So this has worked out for us and produced results. Now, the content in conjunction with the idea of patterns for use cases really helps us. Now, why would that be? The reason is generative AI is so much more powerful than regular artificial intelligence because of the generative nature of it. But it's overwhelming for business teams. There's literally thousands of business use cases you can do with generative AI. But patterns help focus people. And when you combine AI and low code, you can clone applications over and over again. So you can use the same app with different content, different prompts, different audiences, different intent, but it's the same application. You can reuse playgrounds over and over again. The patterns on the left here, these are for deep retrieval. You're retrieving an answer. So you have question and answer of content files and question and answer of data. You can also combine those, mix and match content and data. In addition to that, conversational chat is also a part of this as well. It's just a different format with repeat back and forth. But on the right-hand side, we have something different. We're repurposing content in new ways. This is very much a publishing theme. So I'm going to either transform content, and what I mean by that is either text to speech, speech to text, one language to another language, or we've even done Google Drive, Google File content ingested into OutSystems while maintaining the Google Docs, and the pipeline pushes to an OutSystems application. Now, the fourth pattern we call, and this is just our name, but deconstruction and summarization. So what you're doing is taking large bodies of content, could be structured or unstructured, you're deconstructing them into small chunks. And those small chunks either can be summaries or they can be insights. And you can use both of those in new ways. In fact, we've ingested insights and summaries into other databases for other purposes once they were generated from generative AI. You can also include image analysis in this topic as well. Now, last summer when we started small and started simple. We did a single pattern, single use case. We then cloned our apps and scaled. Today, we're in a slightly more mature situation where we have multi-patterned use cases now. So for like an RFP or RFI use case, it uses all 4 patterns. So let me show you some examples. This is a screen from our customer support. You can go onto our website support portal. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to get a response. It's a structured answer, which we told it to number the answers. But you're going to see there's a couple paragraphs, and then there's article links in green links The red arrows are kind of pointing to them. Now, the answer is answering my question, but the source material behind the scenes is actually coming from 3, 4, or 5 different sources. And it's assembling this answer from the 3 or 4 or 5 different sources. It actually uses the RAG technique, which I'll explain in a moment. But you'll also see article links. Now, why would those be beneficial? Because it helps instill trust in the generative AI. It helps with the stakeholders, but it helps with the audience also to see where you're getting your answer from, to include article links from a knowledge base. Now, I spoke at the beginning about that completely flatlined first 7 months, which is what you see on this graph here. But let me finish the graph so you can kind of see what happened here. So we went to 62% of automated self-service. But you're going to see a separate little extra bump. Why did that bump up from the 42 to the 62? It's 20 percentage points. The answer is conversational chat. We changed our pattern. Not only were we changing LLMs along the way and enhancing our content, but we shifted from a question-answer model into a conversational chat model where you can go back and forth and back and forth. That extra back and forth resolved 20 percentage points with the end users. So it created that extra boost for us. Now, even though it took a couple months to personalize, it was definitely worth it for us because it got that extra boost on the self-service part for our customers, and it actually saves us time. Now, if you remember that green line that was hovering below 10%, that was our initial goal. We were like, can we just please get the green line up to 10%? Well, look at where it is now. It's at 38%. So it got pulled up by the use of the blue, but you'll notice that pink line, which we didn't think we could affect, that requires human intervention. Our pink line is hovering between 20 to 25% automation of the more complicated incidents that usually require a human. Now, we'll probably stabilize around there between 20 to 25%, but that's pretty amazing. And like I said, the whole average now is 38%. I'm going to switch to a different use case, different pattern now. This is language translation. What you'll see here is 81% more developers engaged. We started with Japanese, and this is the statistics from the Japanese. We then went to 4 languages in June. This week, we have 16 total languages, all in a matter of a couple months. Now, what we did here was we hypothesized by doing this, we would increase engagement on our site, which it did actually work. But what's the benefit of this use case is other people saw that we had language translation. So now other generative AI use cases would like to have the language translation. So we now are doing multi-pattern use cases because they're going to inherit the language translation benefit here with the other use cases. So this is a view of the runtime application on our community today with the languages. But let me show you the playground. Now, the user of this playground, again, is marketing, the community members in marketing who are toggling on and off the different languages. So it's a language picker, and they use it when they go and they hire the native speakers. They can also push it live, so they're able to view and look at the translation themselves. So we've enabled the business using OutSystems to run basically configuration behind the scenes on their own. I'm going to switch to another use case here. What you see in the black button on the right, that's the OutSystems application. The screen behind is actually an HRIS SaaS system. So the OutSystems black button can open on top of the SaaS. It's a Chrome extension, OutSystems application. So it allows us to call the LLMs behind the scenes, call the content, but you're sitting on top of SaaS, so it's an integrated experience. Now, if I ask a question here, this is conversational chat, and I get my result, there's 2 things going on behind the scenes that are worth noting. There are 2 agents. The first agent knows who I am, knows my level, and it knows my geography. So it can personalize based on my result. And what we're doing here is we're asking HRIS policy questions and instructions on using the HRIS system. So it's important to know your geography. Now, the second agent, which is chained to the first agent, is actually looking at other content. It uses the RAG technique, and it looks at what other content can help provide a better prompt and a better result based on what I'm asking for. Now, this is what's fascinating. We also took the same OutSystems Chrome extension application. It's the exact same one. It's not a clone. And we placed it on the URLs on our CRM. So a Chrome extension just operates by whatever URL you tell it to operate on. But we changed the use case. Different audience, different content, different intent. Here we wanted more of a coaching prepping tool. So our Chrome extension sits on the contact record of the CRM with personalized information about that contact. Secondly, it sits on the account record with personalized information about that contact to help the reps or marketing. Third, we have the overlay on top of a particular opportunity record, and it gives information about that opportunity. Now, here is the real power of enabling a brain behind your organization. Most organizations, the sales data is kept in their enablement platform, and the marketing data is caught in different campaign databases and different sources. Then you have your web data. Well, imagine across the customer journey, you can actually connect that content. A user's activity across the website, a user's activity across the campaigns. What topic did they click on? Did they watch webinars? Did they download a white paper? You know all of this information. It's probably in your data lake, but it's stuck within the marketing department. Likewise, you have customer stories. You have a portfolio of things that work for sales, but those may be caught somewhere either in a database or actually in files. You can blend files and database material across sales, customer, marketing, your whole customer journey all at once now. So what goes on here? I mentioned the RAG technique, and you heard Luis mention the RAG technique. Simply put, what you're doing is enhancing the generative AI model. You're augmenting, and it stands for retrieval augmented generation, but you're augmenting what's going into the request for the LLM model in terms of finding the right content for what comes out of the model. And it's used in conjunction with proximity search and a vector database. So let me just show you just an example. This actually comes from OpenAI. Say we're talking about animals and their sounds. So a dog barks, a cat meows, and a cow moos. Well, the semantic value of all those words are similar, and so their proximity on this virtual graph, virtual coordinates, they're closer together as a cluster because semantically they mean similar things. But if I say a football player throws a ball, that has nothing to do with animals or sounds. So the proximity is further away from the cluster. So this is what's going on with the RAG technique. You're refining what's going on based on things that are similar semantically, and it can search across your body of content. You don't even have to tell it where to go. It can search across it. So half of our use cases are using the RAG technique. The other half actually don't need RAG. So it's important to notice that you don't have to use RAG all the time. There's other ways of also checking your content too, even including fine-tuning. But the cases where we used RAG were cases where we did not know where the source of the answer would lay in terms of the content. So in the example of the customer support, we didn't know among the 3, 4, or 5 sources where we were going to find the answer. And in fact, the answer was probably a little bit in each source. So we use the RAG technique and proximity search to get the answers for customer support. And actually for our HRIS use case, where we have 30 geographies and we have a lot of policy documentation, travel policy, vacation policy. So RAG was needed for those because we have this repository of files and information that it just needed to run across the whole repository. Now, on the sales side, where we were recording calls and we had call transcripts, or in the case of calling something from the CRM, you're directly calling it. You don't need the RAG technique. Now, in the language translation use case, you don't need these at all because the prompt is what is actually causing the language to change from English to Japanese. That's even more simple. And you can provide guidance and guidelines. But each of these things are important with the content. Now, let me just show you one quick example of the RAG technique with conversational chat. In the first row, you're asking a question, you're enhancing the prompt, and you're retrieving the answer. But in conversational chat, you respond a second time. So what's important is that we have an agent doing 2 things, highlighted in blue. The agent is enhancing my question. So if I said first, how do I book my vacation? That's a how question for the HRS system. So there's going to be instructions. Then if I followed up with, What about US holidays? That's not really a well-formed question. The model would not be sure, like, what is she asking here? So that blue, highlighted blue agent is semantically trying to interpret based on looking at the context history of the chat. What is she doing here? And then it also appends additional phrases and words to make a well-formed question so that it can decide through the vector database and the LLM how to return the appropriate content at the right time that's going to be tied to what my intent is. So this agent is very important in the conversational chat. Now, the chatting part is the easier part, but it actually took us a couple months when we were building this ourselves to detect how to personalize, how to pick up that history, and how to refine returning the results so that it was actually human-like and correct and accurate. Now, for our third part, let's talk about business champions and creating and keeping those business champions with you and what strategies there might be. This is just a checklist. You can use it if it's helpful for you. For us, what we found is, find the curious people, give them a playground, let them play with the LLMs, let them be curious with you, let them experiment, exchange ideas, bring them with you weekly. We did the lean method and we were constantly checking in. So bring them. In fact, some of the use cases we did were today, tomorrow, this week, next week. It was very fast. So if the business people are with you, they're not going to be sitting watching you produce something. Now, what you want to do is have a network effect. It's okay to start with just one champion, then you grow to 2 champions, and 3. But these guys will be alliance partners with you, and then eventually as the results start to get produced, more and more people will hear about it. But you don't have to feel like you need to explain what you're doing to everyone in the company. There will be different phases of change management, and there probably will be some resistance along the way. But if you just start with some use cases that have the proper content and the proper champions, you'll be able to move pretty fast. A lot of our use cases, like I said, were a couple months beginning to end. Now, hypotheses are critical too. So in the first use case where I was talking about customer support, you want to hypothesize that my result is going to be meaningful. It's not just saving an hour. I'm doing something meaningful. And so here we wanted to enable self-service. For the languages use case, we wanted to see if we could increase engagement on our community with developers. In the sales and marketing use cases, we were looking at point of use providing much more valuable information and coaching material. Now, once you have those hypotheses, turn them into business results. So you actually see savings. We saw between 500 and 600,000 of cost avoidance this year that'll be cost savings next year with the customer self-service in the support area. The engagement helps with developers. When developers are engaged, they actually produce more, and they produce more applications for you, and they produce faster. And finally, with sales and marketing, you have an engaged sales force that understands the stories and can find stories at point of use. What kind of better situation do you want than having an engaged sales force? So each of these things, even if they're time savings, they also have a side benefit where they can accelerate sales or can accelerate conversions, bridge the gaps between sales and marketing. Now, I've provided this checklist just in case anyone hasn't created their first use cases in generative AI. This is just our point of view, but I will say the number one step is that first step with legal. When we started, we created an AI policy. We spoke with legal. We kept them with us the whole time when we were purchasing and figuring out the LLM situation, when we were choosing use cases. We also talked to them about our content. So it actually helped us speed up by having our legal team with us the whole time, as opposed to trying to go around them and then finding that you're stopped along the way. So my takeaway from this slide is make sure you speak to your legal team first before beginning, and then keep them in the loop along the way as another stakeholder and just informed. Now, the second checklist is more like for when you're producing use cases over and over again. And we used, like I said, the lean method, which is build, measure, learn. And we did a quick discovery phase. And the discovery phase is great for doing the playground work and also testing out the models and testing out the content and figuring out your strategy. But in terms of the day-to-day, we did things in hours. We did check-ins 3 times a day. We went very fast. We did today, tomorrow, this week, next week. And then we did demos on Fridays and check-ins on Fridays. And if we had to pivot, we did it together with the business team. We said, let's change this. Now, if you get into digital transformation strategy or you look at maturity models, when we work with our customers, we have a checklist like this that gets into generative AI maturity. Now, whatever definition of maturity can go by based on the year 2024, we feel like we're moving towards a more mature state. But of course, the future is full of possibilities. So I would say for what we know right now today with agents, we're doing multi-patterned, multi-agent use cases. But like I said, if you haven't started yet, this is a great framework for looking at what you might need to include in your digital transformation strategy. Now, if any of this seems overwhelming, just take a deep breath. Change 1% each day. You don't need to do advanced use cases on day one. We started simple also. We learned and we grew and we pivoted a lot. We made a lot of changes with the content. We switched LLMs along the way as well. 1% each day. Remember that OutSystems is easy and fast, but I do want you to remember and think of yourselves as publishers of content. And that might be unusual. You come from all different industries. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Every single one of you at your company is producing files and data. All of that is useful for generative AI. So think of yourself as a publisher of content. Be ready and be fast and be ready to pivot, because you're going to run into metrics or things you don't expect, and you're going to need to be ready to make quick changes and quick decisions. Most of all, start today. If you think of anything from this presentation, please choose to start. It's so easy to get caught in analysis paralysis. Now, at the beginning of this whole presentation, I alluded to the movie The Matrix. And I want to leave you with the gift of choice. And when you think about that movie, The Matrix, in that scene where they're choosing between the red pill or the blue pill, I want you to think about some decisions and key choices you're going to make. And I want this to be a very experiential learning exercise for each of you. So under your chairs is my gift for you. So if everybody can just search under your chair, your neighbor's chair, wherever, there's a gift there for you. Open it up. And I would like you to put the blue and the green in your left and the red and the purple in your right. And if you're opposite me, left and right. But I want you to choose and take this choice to heart. Choose to start. Choose generative AI. Choose to create small teams. Choose to organize your content. Most of all, choose OutSystems an AI agent builder powered by Mentor. And if you do, you'll have a world of endless possibilities. Thank you.